Welcome along to another edition of Matchbooks NFL Podcasts. Only three to go, gentlemen. Divisional weekend is ahead of us. Drew Dinsick is on board. Rob Pizzola in the bottom left of the screen and the bottom right. Guten Tag, Herr Sommer. Fabian Sommer is on board as well. Quick recap of last weekend. We're not going to spend too much time on it because it's been covered ad nauseum elsewhere. We're not going to get into those narratives. 3 winners out of 5. Best bet's not so good, but the Raiders Bengals under 49 was a winner. Rams -4. Drew, well played, sir. Your best bet, a winner at even money and under 49.5 in the same game. I could go around the house and ask your thoughts on this. I think I've heard it from basically on Twitter. So we will just dive into divisional weekend. First game, we're going to go back to front in this one, Sunday night. Ooh. For me, the game of the weekend. Bills Chiefs 2.12. You can back the Bills currently on the money line. Chiefs at 1.82. Bills getting a 2-point start at 1.95. Chiefs -2, 1.97. 54.5 is the total. Slight shade towards the over. Drew Dinsick, I know you've got Bills futures. I know you like them in this matchup. But are we going to get the good Bills here? And I know this is like because we got the great Bills last Saturday night. But the week before, they were 3 points ahead of the Jets heading into the fourth quarter. There's got to still be that worry, right, with this Bills that there is the potential for them to play down or play up. But they've got to play up on Sunday night.
Yeah, I mean, over the balance of the season, you look at some of their results, losses to Jacksonville, close calls with the Jets. And yeah, there in the back of your head, there is always a realistic case that the Bills no-show. And, it certainly felt like, at moments in the first quarter of this Kansas City Steelers game, you were going to get the no-show out of the Chiefs in a bad time. But the Steelers, that defensive touchdown really woke that team up. And, now, if you were trying to spin a narrative, I could listen to and be a little concerned as a Bills guy here about somebody saying, yeah, well, now that the Chiefs have kind of unlocked that competitive spirit, they're going to be, they're the team you do not want to face at this point in the playoffs. But kind of reflecting a little bit on that Bills game, there were a couple of key takeaways that has me still very positive about this team's opportunity in this game. Number one, I thought that the way that the game was called by Brian Daboll was an absolute masterpiece. He was using exceptional misdirection. He was using, high plus EV stuff on early downs, long distance. It was not an accident that they went up against the Belichick defense and they scored on every drive. Like it was an absolute masterclass of play calling, I thought. They did get Josh Allen's most superlative performance that we've seen from him as a pro. And that obviously impacts the way people feel about a team, especially you see that scoreboard, you get rewarded if you bet on them. There's a lot of things that make you feel very bullish about the Bills based on that performance. But this is, I don't think anyone thinks this is going to be an easy win, and the market, correctly pricing this in the ballpark of, Chiefs small favorite. And I look at the way that game was called by by Daboll particularly, and the way Josh Allen played. And I really don't know why they can't repeat that against the Chiefs. There's nothing that the Chiefs defense does that's so unique, that's so, so difficult to prepare for, so difficult to execute against that the Patriots defense doesn't do. Realistically, you have all of those same, check all of those boxes in terms of killing them with the deep slants, getting them, getting Josh Allen into the second level like that. Those are all things that the Bills should be able to do offensively. So they should be able to score points here. And realistically, if you're a dog and you want to go head to head against the Chiefs and gets the win, you need to be scoring points. You need to get into the 30s here. And I don't think that's lost at all on Sean McDermott. The way that he called the first head-to-head between these two teams this season, pretty clearly he knew the stakes. He was not, comfortable sitting on a lead. He continued to be aggressive till the end of that game. So there are a lot of positive indicators here for me that have me, feeling good about the Bills' chances in this spot. We haven't spent much time talking about the Bills defense over the balance of this, run up to and playing in the playoffs. But I look back at that again, that early season matchup, and surely the Leslie Frazier knew, like, hey, here's the blueprint that Tampa Bay ran in the Super Bowl. We'll try that, see if we could do that. And I thought that worked very effectively against Pat Mahomes in the first head-to-head. And while the Chiefs offense has introduced more wrinkles over the balance of the season, particularly getting a lot more out of Pat Mahomes on the ground in high leverage downs. They still haven't really shown me that they have the answers to beat the cover two, the deep, the too high safety buster. They haven't shown it yet. And if the Bills defense goes out there and plays a clean game and asks Mahomes to do it the hard way, create one, potentially 2 turnovers over the balance of this game, then I think that we may see a very similar outcome to what we saw back in October.
And Rob, to the Chiefs, I mean, look, it's been kind of well worn at this stage. Their improvement has aligned with the fact that they're not turning the ball over like they were in the last couple of weeks. But I think Drew touched on it there. This Chiefs defense, it has improved immeasurably as well, but they're facing a far different beast than what they were facing last week with the Steelers and Roethlisberger, who can not throw the ball anymore. Can they slow Buffalo down, in your opinion?
I mean, I think that there's a chance that they can. Like, if Josh Allen plays the way he did last week, thanks for coming out to the Chiefs. And it's not only the Chiefs, that's anyone. The Bills will win the Super Bowl if he keeps performing at that level. It's a matter of determining what's the likelihood of that happening. A lot of people will point back to that 38-20 Bills win earlier this season where the Chiefs had zero answer for Allen. Well, they also didn't have Chris Jones playing that game. They didn't have Trevarius Ward. They didn't have Willie Gay, who's not really an impactful player, but if you're going to pick someone on the Chiefs defense, that's going to be your optimal choice of who's going to spy Josh Allen. It's probably him. Dan Sorensen played 100% of the defensive snaps in that game. He's now on the bench where he belongs for the rest of his career. You could argue he doesn't even belong in the league anymore. Chiefs had 4 turnovers in that game. I mean, it was just one of those where you got in my opinion, a performance out of the Chiefs when you account for all the injuries, the personnel that they had. It was just like a low range performance. Now the D, it's a question mark still because they've improved in the latter half of the year. Admittedly, a lot of it is probably due to schedule because outside of Cincinnati and the Cowboys and the Chargers, they really haven't been tested in the latter half of the year. But you do have to remember they were also getting cooked by bad teams early in the season. So there has been some improvement. At least we can say that they're not the defense that they were early on in the year. I went back and I looked at Josh Allen's career numbers, and he's played 66 games in the regular season and the postseason in his career. He's had 12 games where he's had a quarterback rating of 120 or more, which is an elite level game. His average quarterback rating in the games following that are 84.6. His median rating is 79.7. So when Josh Allen has had an 80th percentile game or better, the following game, he is produced at the level of what Baker Mayfield, Jalen Hurts, and Daniel Jones produced at this season. Now, that's an arbitrary endpoint. I get it. But even if I expand that out further, you still get very similar results. And the point is that it's very difficult to put together these performances, these strings of performances at an elite level. So as much as we want to talk about last week's game, there have really been only 3 impressive Bills games in the past couple months. 2 of them were against the Patriots, which you can argue there's a stylistic mismatch there because of the way that they smoked them in the last 2 games. One was against Trevor Siemian. They lost by 26 to the Colts. They were getting the doors blown off them against Tampa Bay before that late charge to force overtime. They struggled to put away the Jets. They struggled to put away the Falcons. And by the way, that Bills-Bucks game, which was just over a month ago, is actually on my birthday, December 12th. I remember it clearly. The Bucks closed 3.5-point favorites at home in that game. So now we have a larger home field advantage for the Chiefs in the playoffs. We have a better team, in my opinion. I think the Chiefs are better than the Bucks. The game's on the other side of the 3. And to add to that, that was the only real test that the Bills' pass defenses had without Tre'Davious White. And they got torched by Brady in that game. They've basically been playing middling quarterbacks for the majority of the latter half of the year. So are the Bills great? Yes, I think they are. I think there's a little bit of recency bias here because they're coming off just an epic performance. It's very hard to think back and not think about anything other than what we saw last week. But in my opinion, the Chiefs are somehow flying under the radar here. In the second half of the season, they were tops in the league offensively in EPA. If we adjust for schedule, they were still number 1. Buffalo was 7th. If we adjust for schedule, they fall out of the top 10. So I just feel like I'm scared to death of betting against Buffalo. I feel like KC is the side where we have a lot of recency bias with the Bills. And frankly, we have an opportunity to bet Pat Mahomes under a field goal, which again is not going to come along, I think, very many times over the next decade or so. So this is a Chiefs or nothing game for me. Would any outcome surprise me? Absolutely not. But I just feel like the Bills are basically at the top end of what they are right now in terms of the way that they're viewed by market.
Yeah, no, hard to disagree with that. Suma, what do you think with this one? Just to refresh my memory, this game last year was obviously the conference championship game. The line was about 3, wasn't it? Chiefs laying 3, and that was kind of an injured Mahomes. So it's not too dissimilar there, Suma. But what are you taking away? I know you haven't bet this personally, but in terms of any way edges in either side, what are you seeing so far?
I think I agree with both guys. Both have made valid points for both sides here. I also agree with Rob that, or let's say, I will take some arguments from Rob that if the Bills passing offense is on, or if the whole offense is on, I think it will be super difficult for the Chiefs, because I just think that the Bills against the Pats, they've even added some wrinkles like a fullback run game, Josh Allen on a lot more designed runs. And if we take a look at the Chiefs defense that got a lot of praise over the second half of the season, they faced 2 solid quarterbacks. Dak Prescott, he was without Amari Cooper and he was without CeeDee Lamb for half of the game. They got torched by Justin Herbert and they got torched by Joe Burrow. So, and both passing offense are basically the same as in the sense that they can beat man coverage. And I think that the Chiefs basically have to come out with a perfect defensive game plan, hit some perfectly well designed and timed blitzes, and just try to force Josh Allen to make some, let's say, brain dead turnovers or some really bad plays. Because if you take a look at that passing attack, I mean, Dawson Knox, Cole Beasley, Manny Sanders is healthy, Stephon Diggs. I just really don't see how the Chiefs secondary matches up with that. And I think I probably would not say that I necessarily trust the Chiefs to find more answers for the opposing defense than I do with the Bills. However, I also think that the number right now is pretty fair, so I don't really have any edge there. If the total was lower, I think it would be a very good opportunity to bet on a shootout and to bet on a high-scoring game, but that's also been fairly well priced at 55 right now. I think anything 44 or lower would be a great opportunity to bet the over. Maybe it comes back down later in the week. We don't know. Sometimes these high totals come back down later in the week. But yeah, those are pretty much my thoughts. I'm pretty neutral on that game. I can probably make a case for either side. If you give me Buffalo +3, I will be interested in Buffalo. And if you give me KC a pick 'em, I will be interested in KC.
I'm almost certain we just talked about that line last year with the -3. I'm sure that total was like 56, 57 and above 54. So there's a reason, obviously, why it's that, because you start putting that up at 51, 52, you get a lot of money. Drew Dinsick, wrap it up here first. Have you actually bet the Bills here, Drew? Or are you going to?
Well, I have a net position where I'm effectively on the Bills money line, and I haven't taken any liability. I haven't de-risked at all, so I'm basically Bills money line. Last year's playoff matchup, Bills were the hot side from what I remember. And almost all of the action that was supporting it was mostly based on, Mahomes. It wasn't just a head injury, foot injury. Is mobility going to be a problem? There was a lot of swirling. It was. I think people were expecting it wasn't just like, oh, I love the matchup. The Bills are hot right now. They're going to beat the Chiefs finally. It was much more about Mahomes question marks. So I don't know that market tells us a ton. The game, though, I think does. And the coaching X factors for this matchup, I think, are somewhat important. In that game, the Bills had no answer for Travis Kelce. As soon as the Chiefs unlocked that aspect of their offense, it was one-way traffic. In that game, Sean McDermott did not have a full grasp of the stakes. He was kicking field goals when he should have gone for it. He was, just in general, lacked some aggressiveness. They had a bunch of minus EV runs on long down in distance. early down, long distance, and realistically, you came out of that game with like, man, McDermott really was out of his class, and they really, that defense wasn't ready. And then I felt like they must have spent a majority of their offseason legitimately just game planning for how they were going to take on the Chiefs the next time they faced them, because the game plan that they rolled out in Arrowhead. Okay, so again, the third time now that they're going to Kansas City in the balance of one calendar year. The game plan they rolled out in October was literally like as good as you could have asked for. The aggressiveness was there. All of those problems had been solved. The defense ran a completely different scheme that completely took, they basically were like, yeah, you can have for the Travis Kelce. We're going to have a guy ready to tackle him. We're not going to give you extra yards after the catch on that play, but we're going to tempt you to try to go deep, and we're going to take the ball away. And you have two safeties in two all-pro safeties. I think, both were all pros, right? There was first one of them was first team, and the other Hyde and Pryor. One of them was first team, the other was second team all pro. But you have the guys that literally, if Mahomes gets frustrated because the offense isn't finding its fifth gear and he starts forcing it downfield, those guys are going to be able to take advantage of that, I think. And this is literally going to come down to coaching, making the correct decisions, hitting every kind of fourth down decision correctly, going for two correctly, and creating the one or two turnovers that give you an extra possession in this game. Like, that's how fine the margins are. And to the degree that I believe in McDermott at this point, given what he showed us in the first matchup and what he showed us in his first playoff game this year, the degree that I believe in the defense's scheme being able to create the turnover. And I still have questions in the back of my head about Andy Reid's clock management, about Andy Reid getting a little too cute in the goal line stuff. Like, when those plays work, it's cool. Everybody's like, God, what a genius. Who saw that coming? But at the same time...
But Drew, even on that, against the Steelers, when they were so far up, why were they using all those plays?
Got to get the underhand toss touchdown. You have to get it. I mean,
Andy Reid at times, he's
showboating.
He's doing it. Yeah. He's doing it for reasons that don't entirely make sense. And in one hand, you could say, well, you're putting it on film so that other teams down the road have to prepare for that, and that's a tactical advantage. But on the other hand, like, there were games like the game that the Chiefs had against the Falcons last year, where they were 12 point favorites, and in Arrowhead, end of the year, Falcons playing for nothing. And Andy Reid decides, let's have a wide receiver make a downfield pass. And it's like, you're in the red zone, like, you have the best quarterback on earth. Like, why in the world are you taking the ball out of his hand and putting it in a wide receiver's hands to make that pass? And if Andy Reid has one or two brain farts in this game, if he has any kind of a clock management blunder at the end of the first half, end of the game, then that's advantage Bills. And realistically, they're getting some points here. You're getting plus price on the money line. I think it's worth standing pat here for me with the Bills, or making a bet on the Bills money line. In a neutral situation.
It's a fascinating encounter, gentlemen. No two ways about it. It's the reason I booked Monday off work, because you got to stay up for this one if you're on this side of the Atlantic. But I don't know if there's a bet there in terms of an official play, but that's okay. It's Wednesday. Things can change. And obviously, if you're watching this now, you'll have your own mind made up, and hopefully the guys will have tipped you over the edge either ways. Earlier game on Sunday, Rams head to South Florida to take on the Bucs. Current betting, as we have it, at matchbook.com. You can back the Rams here at 2.34. The Bucs at 1.68. The Rams are getting a 3-point start at 1.88. You can back the Bucs in the same market at a good odds against there, 2.04, and 48 is the total, more or less a touchdown less than the previous game. Summa, talk to me about the Rams here, because obviously we saw them on Monday night. And look, I'm not going to say it's like Stafford getting a monkey off his back like Steve Young did back in the day. But that was a big statement game for Stafford. He was pretty on point. And when this Rams offense is pouring like it did then, it's going to be hard to stop them. Can they do it on Sunday, though, against this Bucs defense?
Yeah, so all recency bias aside, I mean, that game on Monday was basically perfectly called from Sean McVay, perfectly executed from Matthew Stafford. And I think what we saw with the Rams on Monday is that this team has such an incredibly high floor, and it's basically all about whether Matthew Stafford can play a 95% clean game and not throw a stupid pick six in his own red zone. So as long as Stafford plays a clean game, this team is so talented. This is such a high offensive floor, defense stacked with playmakers. So I think they just showed us how good they really are. And now coming into the game against the Bucs, I mean, first of all, I think that the Bucs defense has taken a small step back this year. They are not as good at stopping the run. They are basically ranked in the same area against the pass as they did last year, but they have played the easiest schedule of opposing offenses in terms of UA. Their schedule is ranked 32nd in the league right now. And even if you look at their schedule, they faced Dak Prescott in week 1, they faced Josh Allen, and they face, I think, Matthew Stafford in week 3 or 4. That's 3 good passing attacks, 3 good quarterbacks in the whole season, and they conceded 30 points per game. I think that their pass rush is not as great as it was last year. They are pretty much dependent on getting home with blitzes. Todd Bowles blitzing at the highest rate in the league at, I think, over 40% according to Pro Football Reference. But now we get a little bit into trouble for the Bucs defense here, because I think against the Rams, you want to get home with 4. You want to create pressure with 4 against Matthew Stafford, because this season Stafford has killed the blitz all season long. He's averaging 0.52 EPA per pass attempt against blitzes, and that doesn't bode well when you call a blitz rate of 40% against him. So I think the Bucs will probably slow down their blitzes and not blitz him as frequently as they have blitzed opposing quarterbacks the whole season. But then again, I just don't think that the Buccaneers have that great of a pass rush this season. I mean, Jason Pierre-Paul is not having a good season. Shaquille Barrett is banged up. Ndamukong Suh is like 33 years old right now. Vita Vea is still a beast. But I just don't think that they have such an elite pass rush as they did have last season. So I'm not sure whether they can get consistent pressure on Matthew Stafford. And I also think that McVay has shown a very good tendency to beat the Todd Bowles defense over the past 2 seasons. And I just think that with Cooper Kupp, Odell Beckham, with all these great play designs, as long as Matthew Stafford doesn't do these crazy stupid turnovers, I think the Rams should have a pretty good offensive output against the Bucs defense. And then on the other side, the Buccaneers are without Chris Godwin, they are without Antonio Brown, and they are likely without their all-pro right tackle Tristan Wirfs. So that's a pretty different offense from the early parts of the season. And since they lost Chris Godwin, they haven't really faced any solid defense. They've played the Panthers twice, they've played the Jets, and then they've played the Eagles last year, who played some pretty static zone coverage over the first 4 or 5 drives, and Brady was able to dink and dunk them down the field. I think this is going to be a different matchup this time. I don't think the Rams defense is like top 3 material, but they have the playmakers up front to really push the pocket. They also have Tom Brady's nightmarish interior pressure with Aaron Donald. Von Miller may be against a backup right tackle. Jalen Ramsey, you can put him on Mike Evans. And I just think that the Rams defense has enough players to basically slow down that receiving corps and to make Brady hold the ball a little bit more. I'm not saying that the Bucs offense will be shut down in this one. They will get their fair share of chances at getting some scores home. But overall, I think in this matchup, I think the Rams offense is good enough to score points. And then their defense, especially if they have a lead and Tom Brady maybe needs to hold the ball a little bit more than he wants to, I think the Rams really have the matchup to get the Bucs a very, very good game. And I think this is going to be a pretty close one, and I'm kind of leaning the Rams here.
Yeah, and Rob Pizzola, like the Bucs got out of jail a lot, I found, on Sunday. They just weren't tested because that Eagles offense was so putrid, and look, they had their way with the Eagles defense ultimately. They're in for a whole bigger test on Sunday against this Rams offense, right?
I think they are. Unfortunately, the Rams won in such convincing fashion that I think it sucked a lot of the line value out of what this could potentially have been. I was expecting if the Rams had won a close game, the Bucs probably would have opened in 3.5. Maybe the market would have supported the Rams at that point and brought it to 3. But because we got such a good performance out of the Rams, it's kind of like, okay, do I want to bet this number or is it going to be a pass? I mean, very weird game for the Rams against Arizona because it's largely the Cardinals self-destructing in that game as well. Matt Stafford only had to throw 17 passes. They ran the ball 38 times, and they had just a 28% success rate running the ball. So they're going to have to be more reliant on the pass this week against the Bucs. And for a lot of people, the prospect of relying on Stafford is going to make them sick to their stomach. This is an outdoor game. Traditionally, Stafford worse when he's not in a dome stadium or he's not on turf. But we're looking at good weather, almost no chance of rain right now, winds around 10 miles an hour, temperature in the low 60s, mid to high teens for the rest of the world outside of Drew for this game. But I'm optimistic about Stafford's chances because Suma hit the nail on the head, right? Tampa blitzes more than any team in the league. That's the Todd Bowles MO. It's not going to change. And Stafford has excelled against the blitz partly because I mean, if you have a receiving trio of Cooper Kupp, Odell Beckham, Van Jefferson, they can beat man coverage. You can throw it up to those guys one-on-one, and they can make a play. We saw Odell Beckham score a touchdown that way on a fade route on third down, which, I mean, very low percentage play, but they have the guys that can make those plays. And outside of Shaq Barrett, who is great, bordering on an elite pass rusher, the Bucs don't have a single edge defender that has a PFF pass rushing grade of higher than 61.8. They do not have a secondary pass rush outside of Shaq Barrett, and the Rams offensive line has the best pass block win rate in the entire league, partly because their left tackle, Andrew Whitworth, has the third highest pass block win rate, and Rob Havenstein, the right tackle, is number 5. So they're getting very good production out of their tackles. The Tampa win over Philly, like, who cares? Philly ended up being the Dolphins of the NFC, right? That's basically what they beat. Nobody all year. Every time they had a step up in class, they lost. They had another step up in class, they lost. The one thing for the Bucs out of that game that you take away is that they potentially have offensive line issues going forwards. Ryan Jensen and Tristan Wirfs very likely to play, but if either of them is not at 100%, that has big upside if you like the Rams because of the strength of their defensive line as well. And this is the game, like Suma said, where the impact of no Godwin, no Antonio Brown, you feel that when you go up against a corner tandem of Jalen Ramsey and Darius Williams. It's not a great matchup. So I lean heavily to the Rams in this one. I think the Bucs are a little bit overvalued right now. The lack of offensive weapons didn't really hurt them against the Eagles because that's the Eagles. But now it's a big step up in class for them. I think the Rams are very live in this game.
I did mean to thank you as well for flagging that Eagles money coming as well on Sunday. I saw your tweet and I was like, oh, seriously? We're going to get 7 here? I think it was 6.5 around as well. I'm pretty sure it was. And like, you didn't have to pay much to get it. Crazy stuff. Drew Dinsick, what are you thinking here? Rams or nothing for you? I'm thinking.
Yeah, Rams for me. This is one of the bigger positions I ultimately have in terms of net, win-loss this week. The last week's results do make this really, really tough. And I think both fellows made very valid points. Most recently, Rob saying, what do you take away from that Bucs win aside from Philly no-showing and Hurts being not ready for the moment? Not much. What do you take away from that Rams win besides, Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury no-showing? Not much. And honestly, if I can almost make the negative, the bear case for the Rams here more than I could make the bull case, just because I've kind of gone through in my own head, like, am I going to de-risk here? Am I going to grab some Tampa Bay money line and try to, just hit something positive? Sean McVay's approach in that Cardinals game was frustrating at times. He seemed very intent on, trying to establish the run and, not let Stafford make the mistake that was going to break their back. And you can read that two ways, where he was, he knew that he could win the game just by putting Kyler Murray in disadvantaged situations. And so he was intent on doing that. And he didn't care about, giving up some win probability on his offensive snaps. And, he wanted Stafford to have a comfortable win, feel good about himself, come out of this one with a little bit of confidence heading into the next round. Like, I would listen to that if he was like in a candid moment. That's why I did this. But in the back of my head, he's made a lot of in-game decisions over the bounces of his career that scare me. And Bruce Arians does the same. So it's not like he's going up against the smartest guy in the world in terms of in-game decision making, and there's a huge advantage there for the Bucs. Yeah. I look back at the first matchup between these two teams, and I think there's a lot of things that are important to contextualize for people who are betting this game and who maybe kind of remember that one. It was a 10-point final score, margin of victory for the Rams. But if you watch that game and if you bet the Bucs in that game, then it was not ever really close. That was one-way traffic for the Rams from Jump Street. They had a scripted portion of their playbook ready to go out of the gate that was unstoppable. And they were the healthier team in that matchup, which I think impacted a lot of things. They were the home team in that matchup, which certainly helped them to a degree. And it felt like that was in the same way that the Bills kind of used the Chiefs game, early season game, as sort of like their early season Super Bowl, for lack of a better terminology. It felt like the Rams did that with the Bucs game. Like, they knew that was on their schedule early. They knew it was going to matter to beat the Super Bowl champions and get a little bit of momentum for their season, try to get the 1 seed, blah, blah, blah. And so they put a lot of their best stuff on tape in that game. So you got an A+ performance out of the Rams. Secondary was injured for the Bucs. Antonio Brown wasn't there for the Bucs. Like, there was a lot of a lot of problems in that game for Tampa in general. Tom Brady threw the ball 55 times in that game and still could only generate 24 points. The offensive line was fully healthy for the Bucs in that one and really kept Aaron Donald from making any kind of a difference. But basically all the distinguishing factors that I had for the Buccaneers heading into that head-to-head and why I bet them in that game didn't end up mattering much. And, the Rams, I think, do match up pretty well for this Buccaneers team in terms of what they like to do. The Buccaneers defense likes to generate pressure. They're very aggressive. The Buccaneers defense tends to put their cornerbacks on an island. That could be a problem. If they're coming with an aggressive pass rush here and the pass blocking is working for the Rams, which it has in basically every game of the season, there's going to be some opportunities for Stafford and Kupp, Stafford and Beckham to just go absolute ham on this pass defense because, they are relatively healthy. It looks like all of their best guys will be available in this one, but I haven't seen Jamel Dean perform at the same level he was performing through the first half of the season coming off of his injury. He's a step slower. Sean Murphy-Bunting is a guy that you can pick on because he likes to take chances. And if you were using a little bit of mixed direction, if you were using, and that's kind of where Stafford excels. Like, he's trying to do fancy stuff. Sometimes it bites him in the ass. Sometimes it absolutely, creates game-breaking plays. But I think you can do that against a guy like Murphy Bunting. I think you can do that against a guy like Carlton Davis as well. So realistically, I think the Rams are going to score points here. It's going to be incumbent upon the Buccaneers to keep a positive game state if they'd like to win. I don't even really hate the Rams in comeback mode in this one, just because, again, I think their pass pro can do a good enough job of, keeping the aggressive defense off of Stafford, and Stafford can pick apart the secondary with his wide receiver set here. But Rams, I think, almost certainly want to play with the positive game state here. I think it's going to be pretty important for them to come out and get a lead. I think the distinguishing factor may just be Von Miller going up against a replacement left tackle. Like, that could entirely be the issue. I don't know if we have, a solid read on what Wirf's availability was, but that looked like a pretty serious injury. I know he's effectively questionable, but I would be surprised if he goes. Even guys like Jensen came out of snaps for that. Ryan Jensen, the center for the Bucs, came out for snaps during that Philly game, so he's playing a little bit limited. Aaron Donald and Von Miller might be the difference here. Tampa Bay really only has Mike Evans, and if Jalen Ramsey can do a decent job taking him out of the game, and this becomes a matter of they have to get it done with wide receivers and tight ends that don't really have the game-breaking speed or the ability to separate anymore, then advantage Rams. So ultimately, all told, I'm pretty happy being on the Rams in this one.
Yeah, probably unlikely that we playoff Lenny back either. That doesn't look like it's so if they get ahead, I don't know. Like, even can they run the ball with him?
Bring playoff Lenny back. Bring him back.
Yeah,
I'm sure. And actually, you know what? Bring playoff Lenny back and target him 7-8 times. Fine with that.
All right. Rams +3 is 1.88. I know there's not a lot of bets this week, so I'm just locking that one in as a selection. So when people go to Matchbook Insights, they can check it out. Also, on Matchbook Insights, you'll be able to check out our latest sign-up offer. But for our specific NFL offer, if you use the bonus code NFL20 when signing up, you'll see it on the screen behind me. Bet 20, get 20. Use the bonus code NFL20 when signing up at matchbook.com. And no doubt, if you check out oddschecker.com on Saturday or Sunday, you will see the Matchbook Invariably's best price on the money line and a whole host of these point spreads and totals. All right, we're sticking in the NFC. The Packers play host to the 49ers. This is going to be a good one, too. Really like this one, the marquee matchup on Saturday. 49ers at 3.25. Wow, that's a big price. 1.4, you can back the Packers. 49ers getting a 6-point start at 1.98. You can back the Packers -6 at 2.0. 47.5 is the total, and the money is coming for the Packers. But Rob Pizzola, make the case for the opposite side. Obviously, look, there's injuries that we got to be concerned about. Bosa's the huge one. Fred Warner as well, obviously a big one. And are we kind of confident enough that Jimmy G's thumb is kind of, because there's potential there as well. But 49ers, if they can get that running game going, they're going to be hard to beat.
I agree with you. I mean, we got to monitor the Jimmy G stuff, obviously. If this is a Trey Lance game, I want nothing to do with the 49ers. I don't think it's going to be, because I know where that original tweet started. And let's just say I don't believe in the source of where that's coming from for obvious reasons. I think it's a lot of times this person has been thrown some stuff out there. So let's say that Fred Warner very likely to play. Nick Bosa did not practice. Now, we don't really know anything about Bosa's status other than that it was considered a quote-unquote minor concussion. That doesn't mean that he will be cleared for this week, but it gives him a higher likelihood of getting cleared. Now, this is important to have Bosa on the field because the 49ers rarely blitz. They're the 4th lowest blitz percentage team in the entire league. I don't really like their secondary. Emmanuel Mosley is fine. He's an above-average corner, but they're starting Josh Norman on the other side of the defense. He's cooked. Their depth at corner is not great. K'Wan Williams is fine, but outside of that, they don't really have any game changers. So they need the pass rush working to drop as many guys into coverage as possible. That's their best chance of potentially double teaming Devontae Adams and limiting what Aaron Rodgers is able to do. So I am going to proceed with the assumption that Bosa is likely to play, more likely than not. And if that's the case, then I do like the 49ers' chances on defense to not get completely killed, is basically what I'm getting at. And that's important to me because I think the 49ers can move the ball. As you mentioned, Sully, Green Bay's defense, very susceptible to the run, 30th in success rate against the run this year, 30th EPA, 28th, DVOA. We have 3 instances this year of them playing a top 10 rushing team in terms of EPA per play. One was Seattle. They won that game 17-0. I was very surprised to see Seattle was actually top 10. They finished 2nd in EPA per play rushing. But that was the first game back for Russell Wilson off a finger injury. Seattle's backfield was a mess. In fact, if you watch that great game, Green Bay did stack the box on defense, and they tried to make Russell Wilson beat them. He wasn't able to do so. On the other 2 games so far this year, one of them was against San Fran earlier this year. The other was against Cleveland. Cleveland, for as miserable as they were this season, they took the Packers the distance on Christmas Day. They lost that game 24-22. They ran for 8.8 yards per carry, but Baker Mayfield had 4 turnovers in that game, and that's ultimately what cost them. Earlier in the year, Green Bay beat San Fran 30-28. Very close game. San Fran actually didn't run the ball all that well, but they were in a trailing game state most of the game. Trey Sermon was their starting running back at the time. Deebo Samuel was not involved in the running game there either. So completely different team. And by the way, back in week 3, when these teams played, the 49ers closed as a 3.5-point favorite. So we have a massive adjustment from then to now. The Packers are better than we thought they were at that point, in my opinion. Arguably, so are the 49ers with the way that they've played down the stretch, beating the Rams to get into the playoffs, beating the Cowboys last week, both road games as well. But ultimately, when it comes down to things, I like the matchup for the 49ers a little bit, but also Green Bay winning by margin. Like their average scoring margin this year was plus 4.6. For an elite team, that is much lower than the rest of the elite teams. Kansas City, Tampa Bay, Buffalo, all above a touchdown in terms of scoring margin. Those are teams that are much more likely to blow out the opponent, The Packers played a lot more close games, and I just don't see that much separating these teams. Obviously, there's some situational stuff you have to account for because the 49ers are playing a bunch of tough games in a row. The Packers have essentially had, 2 bye weeks. They played their starters a little bit against Detroit, but really they've had a long time to sit and prepare for this. You now have the injuries to factor in for San Fran. You have the cold weather, which historically has helped Green Bay as well. But overall, I just don't feel that there's enough separating these two teams, including that situational advantage, to warrant a 6-point spread. So I have a very strong lean to the 49ers. I, like many, will be waiting for Bosa to officially be in before firing, and it's probably going to have to be very quick at that point because the market will react, certainly. But
how much will it react, Rob, in your opinion? What's he worth, do you think, to that spread?
Well, I think it moves off 6 undoubtedly. Now, where it goes, there's a lot of dead numbers there, right? Like 5.5, 5, I don't know. And traditionally speaking, I will say this is a round where, I could be completely dead off on this game because going back years, there's been tons of market support for the team off the bye. We're seeing that with Tennessee right now. We might see that with Green Bay later in the week. I actually work with guys very closely who bet a lot on the NFL that they really value this bye week even more so than I do. So could be something there, but I do think that when that news is announced, it does come off 6 quickly. Whether or not Green Bay gets some money back later on the week, I don't know about that.
Drew Dinsick, it's never great to go against Bobby Pizza, but make the case for the defense with Packers. You like the Packers in this one?
Oh, Drew.
Oh, you're muted, bud.
Muted. Amateur hour, Drew.
Amateur hour. Amateur hour. Here we are, week 20, and I finally screwed up. I went to war with Packers in week 3 in San Francisco. Not only did I come out victorious with my best bet Packers in that spot against the Niners, but we beat Jerome Boger's officiating crew as well. And that was a weird game. If you go back and watch that one, a lot of very unusual things happened in that one that I don't think you can take a ton from that and use and apply to this particular matchup. This matchup actually feels a lot more like the Rams-Packers game from last season's playoffs to me, because of the situation and the way that this works out for the Packers coming into this game fully healthy, off of extra rest, at home in the cold, in the primetime spot. And you're taking on a Niners team that not only sustained a ton of injuries, leaking oil, gets across the line against the Cowboys last week. Really underperformed in doing so, if you want to be honest. Like, they should have scored more than 24 points, 23 points. It was a 23-17 final. They should have scored more than 23 points in that game, the way the offense was moving the ball. And yet oh, by the way, their quarterback has an injured thumb and shoulder, and his throwing shoulder. Was doing press last night and admits that the shoulder injury impacted his performance in the second half of that game. I realistically, I don't see how you can expect any kind of a negative game state here for the Niners to work in your favor if you're backing them. Like, the back door, it's not open in this one. In my opinion, this is the kind of game where, yes, the 6 and the 5.5 matters. And it matters because if this game goes to overtime, the likelihood that the Packers play for the touchdown is pretty high, because Mason Crosby is not a guy that you really want to go out there and put your season on the line with, if it comes to that. So the Packers winning by 6 is a real outcome that has, a little bit of a modal standout, I think. That said, I don't think it comes to that. I think this is an alt Packers spread kind of a game. And I think it comes down to the fact that the Packers are going to come in fresher and have an amazing game script, take advantage of some of the weaknesses in the San Francisco defense. San Francisco's defense does have spots that you can press, and the Packers did it, I think, pretty well. Maybe the one takeaway that you can take from that Week 3 matchup is they knew exactly where to put Davante Adams in that secondary to find the completed pass whenever they needed it, anytime during that game. And I think realistically, he is the X factor in this one. The Packers haven't really had to use Davante Adams nearly as much this season, particularly in the red zone. And I think they have that in their back pocket in this one. If you remember last season's Packers run, it was like an ongoing joke. Davante Adams, anytime touchdown scorer, should be minus 500. right? Like every single game, anytime they got into the red zone, Aaron Rodgers was only looking at Adams. And I feel like that hurt them in the championship game against the Bucs. They recognized that with the self-scouting they did in the offseason, and they went away from that to a degree during the balance of this regular season. And I think that he is going to be an absolutely dynamic weapon in the passing game, particularly in the red zone in these playoffs. Now, all told, I think this really does simplify down to Jimmy Garoppolo in the cold with an injured shoulder and an injured thumb. I expect them to put him out there, and I expect that he may give you a half of competitive football. But the idea that he's going to be able to go score for score with Aaron Rodgers, I don't buy it. The idea that he's going to be able to kind of make up a negative game state, I'm not there. So I'm happy laying the points here with the Packers.
Are you just a very quick follow-up, not trying to play devil's advocate there, but are you worried that the 49ers running game will have so much success that they will burn the clock and they will just limit those Rodgers and Green Bay possessions? You won't really have to kind of factor in Jimmy G at all.
That game that you're describing is a smash the over button, honestly, because if that's the way it goes, if the running attack for the Niners is so good that they're getting, they're getting yards on the ground and they're going on 10-minute drives that are ending in touchdowns, not field goals, the Packers are coming right back and scoring a touchdown. I don't think that the Packers get themselves into a meaningfully negative game state here because they can't find success offensively against the Niners defense. They didn't show it in the matchup last time. And really, if you go back to like the NFC Championship game 2 years ago, where the Niners basically did what you just said, where they were at home and they basically, Jimmy G barely even passed in that game, and they won easily.
Yeah.
That type of matchup it will be there for them in this game, even because the Packers defense they play light. And in general, going up against a good offensive line and a dynamic rushing attack, there's going to be room to, matriculate the ball on the ground for the Niners here. The problem is they get into the red zone, and you saw it last week with Jimmy G. He couldn't make precision passes in that 20 to 30 yard, 20 to 30 yards to go against the Cowboys. He couldn't find those precision passes to hit the small windows available in the defense when the field got narrower. And I think that's ultimately what happens in this game as well, especially with the number of secondary players that the Packers love to play with. They're going to have opportunities to create turnovers in the red zone. And realistically, I think the likelihood that the Packers win the turnover battle is like 80-20. And then ultimately this comes down to, can the Niners get in the back door if they're down by 2 scores in the fourth quarter of this game?
Yeah, it was a good question. It was brought up there by Leonard Welch. Green Bay defense seems to always leave the back door open. Yeah, so leading into now. So just before I come to Suma, look, this one is kind of laden with narratives, this one. We were talking there about a potential total play. What about a first half over where total is 23 currently at matchbook.com? And you have two of probably the best offensive scripters in, Matt LaFleur and Kyle Shanahan. So I know that's narratives and whatever else, but somebody could come out cooking here and just kind of drive this number up. Suma, any thoughts on that one or anything to follow up to what the guys had there?
Just a small follow-up. The reference point that Rob made about the first game, I think it was in week 3. I also think that the Niners couldn't really run the ball. They also had a bad game script, but I think it was also kind of a different offense that time because, like Rob said, Trey Sermon was RB1. Eli Mitchell wasn't even on the roster. I think he was on the practice squad or injured or whatever. Deebo Samuel, the Niners really used him as a runner or started using him as a runner in like week 8 or week 9. And up until this point, they didn't really think about using Deebo Samuel as a runner. And Samuel is averaging over 0.4 EPA per rush. That's like a mile more than Aaron Rodgers is averaging through the air. So that matchup advantage that Deebo provides wasn't really there or wasn't available in week 3. And when we just take a look at the rushing metrics for the Packers defense on the season, 30th in EPA per rush, 30th in rushing success rate, 28th in DVOA, 26th in adjusted line yards. So I just don't really see how the Packers can suddenly come up with a great rushing defense. And I also don't think that Zadarius Smith will play a major role. They might stack the box and try to stop the run with 8 or 9 bodies in the box and say, hey, Jimmy Garoppolo, try to throw over the top with your thumb. I think this is probably the only chance for the Packers to stop the Niners rushing attack. And that might also be what it comes down to in this matchup, because when the Niners, or if the Niners can run the ball, I think it opens up their whole offense, and the Packers all of a sudden have to defend the whole field horizontally and vertically. So yeah, I think it really comes down to whether the Niners will be able to run the ball. We know Shanahan wants to run the ball, and this matchup might also be very good to do that. No, Sully is muted.
The hands moving, the lips are
50%
moving.
success rate on the mutes today.
You know what? Yeah, this is what happens. We get to the divisional round, like the stakes are high, and people are, they're making mistakes. Like this is just how it goes.
I was going to say I wasn't going to insult anyone's intelligence by locking in a bet there when there's conflicting views, but if you want to follow me in on my first half over, look, lads, just follow me in. Again, I don't have enough kind of analytics and kind of different areas in that, but that seems a low enough total for two offenses that can come out of the gates fairly fast. All right, let's move on. Let's wrap it up with the AFC game between the Bengals and the Titans. The Bengals, fresh from that big win, 31 years waiting for that playoff victory, 2.7. The Titans are 1.53. 3.5 is the main line here, 1.93. The Bengals getting the start. 47 is the total, and shaded towards the under there, and the money has comfortably under. But Drew Dinsick, 47, you've bet the over, and it's odds against, but why should we be betting it? Do explain.
So there's not a lot to really look to for this matchup this season. They didn't play each other. This is the only game where we really can't say, hey, look what happened the first time these two teams played. In fact, if you want to go to the last head-to-head, one does exist. In fact, it was last year. It was Joe Burrow's 5th, 6th start as an NFL pro. Tennessee Titans came in as 6-point favorites, and they completely let down in that game. Burrow and the Bengals offense was clean. They were efficient. They were excellent. They cruised to 30-something points, and they get a comfortable win against the Titans, who were at full strength at that time. There's not a lot. I'm not really leaning on that result as an indicator here much, other than to say that I think it gives you a sense of what Joe Burrow can do when he's going up against a defense that really can't generate much of a pass rush. And that's the way that I evaluate Tennessee Titans defense. I mean, they've had moments this year where they've been pretty solid. They've gotten, very decent play out of players who I didn't have rated especially highly on that defensive line, including, Harold Landry and Autry at times. Simmons at times has been, pretty strong player for them. But I think ultimately you're going to have a Joe Burrow that's a lot more comfortable this week than he was last week. And really, if they decide, hey, we need to bring pressure in order to get to Burrow, if we're going to blitz, if we're going to, bring extra men to try to tip the balance here, that's where he's his most dangerous and his most dynamic. And we didn't see it play out much last week because the Raiders just do not blitz. They're the lowest rated blitz rate in the entire NFL at 12%. It's a gap to the next lowest. I think to a degree that limited his production last week, and Joe Burrow specifically his production last week, because there weren't game-breaking plays to be made in that one, because there was lots of players running around in the secondary, particularly when this field got smaller. I think there are clear advantages you can pick on when you face this Tennessee defense for Joe Burrow and company. So basically the over to me at 47 comes down to, will Joe Burrow go out there and get you 21 points? Because I think the Titans defense is going to score pretty comfortably in this one. And I mean, the Titans offense, is going to score pretty comfortably in this one. Ryan Tannehill, we know he's been here before. He's shaken off all of the nerves that come along with kind of a first playoff run, taking his team to the AFC title game 2 years ago. He didn't play especially well in the matchup against the Ravens last year, but most of that loss hangs on the head of Mike Vrabel. I haven't even mentioned Derrick Henry to this point in this conversation, but him being back matters to this over because the coaching staff is silly enough to believe, well, we have Henry back. Now we can go to the play action more. right? And like just having him back on the field, like they will feel more comfortable running the plus EV stuff in their playbook, in my opinion. And AJ Brown is perfectly healthy right now, and he is the actual secret that really gets this team on the scoreboard because his game-breaking plays and play action are so unbelievably strong. And they match up very well against the Bengals secondary that I don't have a ton of positive grades for. So I think realistically, Titans coming in with extra rest, Titans playing at home, they're going to be able to put up points in this one. Bengals are going to be able to answer. This turns into more of a track meet than a field position field goal type of a game. And realistically, I think you have two relatively efficient red zone offenses. You have two relatively, efficient quarterbacks here. I think you're going to have something in the ballpark of 49 as your at least that's my fair total is 49. I think this, there's some serious pressure on the under at this number. It was looking like it was going to land at 47 yesterday before it came back down pretty aggressively. So I'd be surprised if it moves between now and kickoff. But ultimately, I think fair here is still 49. I'm surprised that we're not seeing a little more Cincinnati activity in the market moving this towards 3. But that's a teeny weeny edge for me that I'm not playing.
Yeah, 47 there is 2.02, and Drew, you kind of hit on it there. And personally, I thought this would be the second highest total. Obviously, the Chiefs and Bills was a no-brainer that was going to be the highest, but I kind of had in my head that this would be maybe the standout second highest, unless there's some weather in Nashville, which I don't think there is. Sommer, in terms of a side, I look at this Bengals defense last weekend, and every time I looked up, it seemed like a defensive lineman was being carted off the field. That's got to be a worry here if you're backing the Bengals, isn't it? Because we know that Tennessee can run on you, especially obviously with Henry come back potentially. They could be in for a long day, that D-line.
Yeah, exactly. And Derrick Henry, we might pencil him in for like 20 carries. I don't think he will get a full workload. Probably like a 70-30 split with Dante Foreman. That's what I could realistically see. But yeah, the Bengals defense is not great. And if they were solid, they were rather solid against the run. Now they're losing buddies up front. I think Trey Hendrickson is going to end up playing. But losing buddies on your interior against that Tennessee Titans run blocking offensive line, and especially the way they want to run and the way they can potentially pound Derrick Henry just up the gut and up the middle. I think this could be a long day for the Bengals. And another point is that the passing attack of the Titans, Timo Risky from Pro Football Focus shared this today in a DM group. The passing heat map of the Tennessee Titans is basically everything over the middle. All these in-breaking routes from AJ Brown, Julio Jones, just play action and try to hit something over those linebackers over the middle. And that's exactly where the Bengals defense is very vulnerable. So everything that goes over the middle, the Bengals don't have a lot of answers for. So I think this could potentially be a very good matchup for the Titans offense, where they can run the ball and where they can hit a lot of shots of play action over the middle. And then I think for the Bengals offense, they're going to be very game script dependent because they don't have a high floor. It's a very low floor, high ceiling offense. They need to get their passing game completely clicking in order to score a lot of points. I don't think they will have a lot of success running the ball against the Titans front. So it will pretty much come down to whether Joe Burrow can effectively and consistently move the ball through the air. And as soon as the Titans, let's say they get a lead with like 2 scores, like 10 to 14 points, they can lean on their run game, they can lean on their play action game, and that could be a very, very long day for the Bengals. So I think in order for the Bengals to come up with a win here, I think they need to be very aggressive from the get-go and try to get their passing game going, because once the Titans are in their very lovely run first, play action, and keep the game in front of us state, I think it will be very difficult for the Titans, for the Bengals, sorry.
Rob, I think you're in agreement that a lot of what Suma says there in terms of side. I don't know if there's enough there in the number -3.5 to get you there to play the Titans, but I'd say if I had to really force you, I think you'd be going with Tennessee here.
I would. So I like the matchup for the Titans. I don't like the price of the game. Just speaks to kind of the efficiency of even the early market in the NFL now, but this quickly moved off of 3. I agree with Drew. I'm kind of surprised. Like, I feel like someone out there has to like the Bengals 3.5, and we can kind of just see this game bouncing back and forth. I'm kind of hoping that that's the case. But for me, Tennessee is maybe the most difficult team to value because their entire offense hasn't been on the field together since week 8. And we just have this expectation now that they're all back together. It's going to go back to the numbers that they produced in week 1 to 8, which were pretty good. They were number 8 in EPA, 11th success rate, 9th DVOA. So they were a borderline top 10 offense. And then after the Derrick Henry injury and then subsequently A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, they dropped to 19th in EPA, 19th in success rate, 20th in DVOA. So they get the bye week. That helps them for sure. Historically speaking, very significant, even more significant now when only one team gets the bye week. They get a Cincinnati defense pretty much average across the board this year, but played the second easiest schedule of opposing offenses in terms of EPA. You touched on the defensive line injuries. So from that perspective, I do think that there's possibility for the Titans to really put up points in this game, but it's the first game back with everyone together. I don't think that it's necessarily a given. We have another situation for Joe Burrow this week where he's playing a team that doesn't blitz much. He wasn't great against the Raiders. He wasn't poor against the Raiders. He had a fine game, but he has struggled. I don't even want to say struggle. It's not the right term. He has excelled against teams that blitz him. He has not excelled against teams that don't blitz much. The Tennessee Titans are one of 5 teams in the NFL that blitz at less than 20%. So from that perspective, I kind of like the matchup in that what the Titans do on defense doesn't really play into the hands of what the Bengals want to do on offense. And the Titans defense, especially their pass defense, has been sneaky good this year. They're 5th in success rate, 9th in EPA per play. Their run defense is worse. But if this turns into a game where Cincinnati is running Joe Mixon as much as possible, Cincinnati's just 22nd on success rate in terms of rushing plays this year. That ends up being a big win for Tennessee if they can get the ball out of Burrow's hands, and Cincinnati has a very run-heavy game plan. So ultimately comes down to, am I interested in laying the 3.5? 5 of the Titans' wins this season were by a field goal or less. They have played a lot of close games overall. You have Cincinnati with the better quarterback in the matchup getting 3.5 points. And you also have Tennessee valued pretty highly right now when you consider the fact that they were priced minus 3.5 at home against the Dolphins a few weeks ago, and now they're priced in the same range against the Bengals. It's a tough one for me. Yeah. I gun to my head type of thing. I think Tennessee is the right side in the game, but this has to be 3 if I was going to consider playing it.
Yeah, you know what? Even to Drew's told there, if we get good Zach Taylor this week, then it could definitely be a bit of a shootout in Nashville because
is there a good Zach Taylor?
I was going to say, what is good Zach Taylor?
There was a good one last week.
He was okay, but if we go back
okay for him is good. Okay for him is good.
For him is good, but the Raiders had a chance to tie the game on the final play. It was a game last week.
Dude, the Raiders take that to overtime or win on the final possession if the ball doesn't dink off of Sam Hubbard's helmet on the second to last drive. Because Waller was taking that in for 7, and then you have a 3-point game, and they got the ball back pretty comfortably. So, yeah, Zach Taylor definitely took his foot off the gas at the wrong time, in my opinion. That one, he got lucky.
Coach of the year, Drew. Coach of the year. All right,
the other guy in this game may be the coach of the year too. Vrabel.
That's fair. Yeah.
Let's have a good laugh about that after he makes the game clinching doink like he did last year in the playoffs.
Right.
I don't know. He's done a pretty good job there. All right, we'll rattle through best bets very quickly. Just before I get to that, insights.matchbook.com. We're taking the Rams +3 at 1.88. We're taking over 47 and that one at 2.02. See, these lines are exceptionally efficient this week. The guys haven't got a major edge, but hopefully that was steer in the right direction. Check out the recap of these at insights.matchbook.com, and also you can check out the best bets, which we'll get to in a second. And obviously, if you're watching us now on YouTube, please give us a thumbs up and click the subscribe button. Or if you're listening to us on your preferred podcast app, please leave us a preferential review. Rob Pizzola, your best bet is the 49ers +6 of 1.98. We already covered it. I'm not going to go into it. But you know what, Drew? Just to be Drew, he's taking the Packers -5.5. So we could get a Packers win.
I'll go -6. We'll go ahead. We'll go true head-to-head here. Yeah, we'll go true head-to-head.
This is a guaranteed winner on this week's Matchbook pod. Guaranteed winner.
Guaranteed winner. Yeah.
Well, or guaranteed double push. One of the two.
Oh, true. That's true. We're guaranteed not to lose.
Guaranteed not to lose. Yeah, your money back if this pick lose. If you lose twice, your money back. No, realistically, just final point. You have an elite quarterback in Aaron Rodgers off extra rest at home in prime time in the cold, going up against a guy that doesn't have a thumb and a shoulder that is 100%. This should be a bigger price.
Hey, Suma, I know you haven't got a best bet this week because you actually haven't played anything on your Slack channel. So, but of those ones, +6 and the Niners, -6. Obviously, look, we'd love to have that crystal ball, know if Bose is going, whatever else, but we don't. But right now, 6 plus or minus.
Despite all the injury uncertainty, I'm going with a plus. Sorry, Drew.
Okay. All right.
All right. It's going to be good. It's going to be good game.
I'm waiting for the. We're filming this on what day of the week is this?
Wednesday.
Wednesday. I'm waiting for the Jimmy G does not practice this afternoon. 6.5. Like honestly, if you like San Fran, it's very like you. You should probably wait. There's no reason to jump. I'll take the 6, no problem. But I think it's one of those where you're just better off waiting for information at this point because anything in the market that comes out, like potentially.
Yeah.
You know, I've already seen a circulating tweet about someone who's a doctor for the 49ers, obviously false or whatever, but like Jimmy G wouldn't be playing if it was a regular season game or what. You're better off waiting, I think, if you like the 49ers and if you like the Packers, you get in now.
Let's not forget that we're talking about Jimmy G.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, like he may not be 100%. Even 100% Jimmy G going into on a short week, 6 days rest, going into Lambeau. Okay. All right.
Guys, send your piece, man. I like it.
Great matchup.
All right. Going to be a great one. Like I said, first half over. Don't worry about this +6, -6. First half over, 23. Get it in the bank. Thanks to Drew, Rob, Suma, as ever. 2 more shows left in the season. Good job as ever, gentlemen. Best of luck with your divisional bets. We'll be back next Wednesday. Conference final down to 4 teams. Best of luck. We'll chat to you then. Bye for now.